It's taken me a while to come round to it, but I think I'm ready. What I'm about to tell you happened over a year ago. Doctor Who is considered to be one of the greatest franchises of all time, and is pretty much up there with the likes of Star Wars, Star Trek, Godzilla, and Battlestar Galactica, etc. and so on. Well, mainly popular because of the Daleks, as they are after all the monsters that helped to give the series a boost. It lasted between 1963 to 1989, and was resurrected in 2005 by Russell T Davies. The series is so popular that it has been no stranger to put on exhibitions, and I have been to many over the years, from Longleat to Llangollen, Blackpool to Cardiff, etc. I remember going to most of these as a child, and there was one particular exhibit that was located just outside my home city of Leeds. It first opened its doors in 2006, only a year after season 1 with Christopher Eccleston premiered, and was mainly dedicated to the classic series, but with some new series sprinkled in there as well. So it was a mixture of both. However, it appeared to outlast the other exhibitions, and unfortunately it would close down. But unlike those other exhibits that closed due to either license expiry or public losing interest, this one just closed its doors one day. When I read all this up online, I at first assumed that it was due to the pandemic. However, the exhibition actually closed in 2016, only 4 years before the outbreak of coronavirus. And the website even said that it was under mysterious circumstances. Me being the adventurous type, I decided to investigate, but I went alone, as taking your friends to somewhere that is abandoned is not really the best idea in the world, unless they too were up for it. I packed up some snacks and took my camera, not just to take pictures, but to film as well, because I have seen other adventurous people film abandoned places on YouTube, and naturally I wanted to be amongst them. I drove out the next morning, and the journey from Leeds to the village where the exhibition was took about 20 minutes to get there. The locals appeared to be friendly, however they just minded their own businesses, as I parked my car in the town centre just in case anybody got suspicious on where I was heading. Eventually I walked up and was greeted by a huge old board that had the classic Doctor Who logo, and around it the outlines of the TARDIS, K9, a Dalek and a Cyberman. The entrance appeared to have been boarded up, but I managed to find a weak point and was able to slither my way in. It was very eerie inside, I'm not gonna lie about that. And while yes it was dark, but it was light enough so I could see. However, I had a torch at my side. I started off in the souvenir shop, with the odd merch still inside, and made my way down the hall. The first thing that I came across was a recreation of the TARDIS from the original RTD era, and on the console wall were worn images of actors who played the Doctor, starting from William Hartnell to Peter Capaldi. With the exhibit closing down in 2016, I guess that there was just no time to place Jodie Whittaker, although I did notice that an empty spot had been placed for her. You know, she was typecast the following year, you know what I mean. I continued my journey, and there was a display of mannequins wearing costumes of doctors and companions, and I remember feeling really uncomfortable. I never was a fan of mannequins, always giving me the creeps, hence why the Autons were my least favourites in the show. I walked down the corridors, and this is where many of the monsters were kept, and it was the usual suspects, those being the Cybermen, Autons, Sea Devils, Silurians, Ice Warriors, Sontarans, Vok Robots, Jadoon and Weeping Angels, etc. and so on, as well as some of the props and model sets. I honestly felt like I was wandering in the back rooms. And you're probably wondering, what about the Daleks? Oh yes, I got to them, and that's when things became very interesting indeed. They had their own hall, and there were Daleks of different types, such as 60s Silver, 70s Grey, Imperial White of the 80s, New Series Bronze, and of course Paradigm, and even their creator Davros and Special Weapons Dalek. With all the dust and cobwebs all over them, they kind of resembled the inmate Daleks from the 2012 Season 7 story Asylum of the Daleks. I'd been taking pictures of what I'd been seeing, and so naturally the Daleks would be next. However, there was one particular Dalek that stood out to me. It appeared to be a replica of the Death Zone Dalek from the Five Doctors, but unlike the 70s Grey Dalek that it stood beside, for some reason this one made me feel really uncomfortable. Despite the fact that it was looking up, I began to take photographs of the Daleks, and was just about to take a picture of the Emperor Dalek's personal guard, when suddenly, CLONK! I jumped and turned around sharply, to see that the Death Zone Dalek's eye stalk had dropped. I was shaking but managed to calm myself down, thinking perhaps because it's an old replica, the eye stalk couldn't take the weight anymore. This relieved me a bit, and I almost turned back to the second Dalek until I thought I could hear a whispered voice coming from the Davros replica.
It will track you down. It will track you down.
And at that moment, I thought that he was given a smirk. Immediately I took off and ran back to the entrance. I rested on a bit of wall, catching my breath, wondering what the fuck just happened. Did Davros really talk to me? Or was it just all in my goddamn head? I looked in the darkness of the now closed exhibition. I took a deep breath and returned back to the former Dalek exhibit. I wasn't going to leave without taking any more Dalek pictures. I decided that I was getting paranoid. I told myself to pull it together. I marched back through the corridor, but this time I felt like I wasn't alone. And at that moment, I thought that I could hear something moving from behind my back. When I turned, it seemed to have stopped, and at the time I wasn't sure, but I thought that I could see the outline of a Dalek. I eventually made it back to the Dalek exhibit, and resumed on what I was doing, to which of course was taking photographs. However, when I got to Davros again, I noticed that his expression had somehow changed from neutral to an evil grin, and it was at that moment when I heard those loud noises coming from the darkness. It sounded like rotten wood on the move. I turned around, and to my shock, from out of the darkness emerged the dreaded Death Zone Dalek. It stopped in front of me and lifted its eye stalk, revealing itself to be fucking alive. I took off running, and this time the Dalek followed me. I expected it to be yelling out its battle cry, that being exterminate, but it didn't, and because it was only a replica, I guess that it was incapable of speech. But that didn't matter, I had to get away from the damn thing. I ran towards the exit, but halted, because the wooden beams had collapsed and blocked off the entrance. Much to my horror, I heard the Dalek approaching me, and I had to think fast. I noticed another door, however it said employees only. I quickly ran to it and attempted to break the door down. Luckily I managed to get in, and just in time, as the Dalek or whatever it was got closer. I jumped in and darted up the stairs. I turned back to see the Dalek had stopped, and it just looked up and glared at me, until it reversed and appeared to have given up. Guess it can't hover being a prop, I thought to myself. I looked around to see another room, however there were lots of boxes around me, some being emptied and others were still filled up with more replica costumes, props and model sets that had yet to be displayed, but never got the chance. I came to a window that seemed to have been boarded up, however I noticed that two of the planks had fallen off. It seemed to be still intact, but it did have some cracks at the side, and I thought that if I use one of the planks and push down, then maybe they'll get bigger. I can get out, and it might look like vandalism, but if it all gets noticed by the authorities, it will all hopefully look like deterioration, and nobody will think much of it. I placed one of the planks on the cracks, and applied pressure. It did after all take a while. However, I soon heard what sounded like glass starting to break, and with some determination, I applied more pressure onto the window, and just like that, it exploded. I was overjoyed, as freedom seemed to be on my side, but my little victory was quickly short-lived, because outside the door where I had come from, I heard an all too familiar rolling sound coming up the stairs. The door slowly creaked open, revealing the Dalek. My heart pounced. Are you kidding me? You've got to be fucking kidding. I found myself yelling at it, and I screamed, "What do you want?" The Dalek, only being a replica, said nothing, and it just stared at me like a predator eyeing its prey. It then began to lift up its midsection, revealing a human skeleton. My heart was really pounding my chest, and I felt like it could burst out at any second. The Dalek thing, whatever it was, slowly lowered its midsection, then suddenly it moved again, but this time it charged aggressively. I jumped out of the window, but managed to catch the cell, and I also felt the Dalek slam its plunger in frustration. I was cursing under my breath. However, I soon calmed down. I looked to the side and noticed some steps. I was in quite a predicament, and slowly made my way across. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I could still hear the Dalek moving around inside the building. I was almost at the steps, and before I could make the next move, from out of absolutely nowhere, a huge spider appeared on my hand, and because I'm an arachnophobe, I panicked in horror but lost my balance and fell. However, I luckily landed on some bushes that cushioned my landing, so thankfully I didn't break any bones or sprain an ankle. I got up and retreated back to my car. I looked back to the once great Doctor Who exhibition, and from the window, staring back at me, was the Dalek. I returned back home without any more incidents, and my mind was full of theories. My guess was that maybe the Dalek replica had something to do with the exhibition's closure, but no matter what I came up with, it just didn't seem to make sense. And after all, the internet did say that the exhibition closed down under mysterious circumstances, yet I know that Dalek had something to do with it. I just knew it. And if anyone knew what really happened, then they would probably know. I went back to ask around, but all the residents felt uneasy when I mentioned the exhibition, and one woman even broke down crying, so I wouldn't be able to get any responses out of her. Finally, somebody suggested that I talk to the police, as they might have all the answers. And when I went over to the station and spoke about my little investigation to the abandoned Doctor Who exhibition, at first the cops demanded to know why I was there, as it was strictly forbidden, and after I explained and mentioned about the Dalek with the skeletal corpse inside it, the police looked at each other, shook their heads, and told me the whole story. The exhibition would hold special events called Operator Dalek Day, and these would be on the 17th of May and the 20th of September, and it was when visitors could try out a Dalek for 5 minutes. But on the 20th of September 2016, something would occur that would change the exhibition forever. A young man named Peter Towns was a huge fan of Doctor Who, and was massively enthusiastic on the Daleks, and so the idea of actually getting to operate a full-size replica Dalek was a lifelong dream come true. However, little did anybody know, that dream would quickly become a nightmare. He was placed inside the casing, and at first things went well, then it all went horribly wrong. When Peter was told to stop, he couldn't. In fact, he said that he wasn't doing anything, and he began to panic. The employees and volunteers attempted to restrain the casing in order to get it open, but the Dalek kept breaking loose. They called us, and we could all hear him hyperventilating inside. His wife was hysterically frantic, and their children were scared for their father to be released. The Dalek threw one of the employees, who also got injured during the incident, and while some of the staff attended to her, the Dalek seemed to have disappeared. After the incident, the exhibition was temporarily closed, as investigators were called to track down the now sentient Dalek casing. However, it was unsuccessful, as the Dalek was never found nor seen again. So it was decided to close the exhibition down permanently, out of respect of Peter Towns. And judging by your account, it would appear that the Dalek is back. The cops returned to the abandoned exhibition, and while yes, they could see that there had been movement, but there was no sign of the mysterious Dalek. And Davros looked neutral again, the Dalek appeared to have vanished like a spectre in the night. The police officer looked over the pictures that I had taken, and in all of them, the phantom Dalek was present, either in the background, as a reflection, or a shadow on the wall. It had been watching and stalking me the whole time. The officer could see that I looked uneasy, and suggested that I go home. It's been over a year now, as I said at the start, and what made me finally pluck up courage to tell the story is that just recently on the news, I heard that the exhibition had been cleared out, and the building itself was bulldozed over, i.e. knocked down and demolished, but the phantom Dalek was never discovered. I still think about Peter Towns and the life that he could have had, and the mourning woman who I met must have been his wife. The Dalek phantom may not have been seen again, however, now and then in the middle of the night, just outside my house, out on the streets, I could still hear that all too familiar rolling sound.